it says we are live. I'm going to trust that we're live. I'm going to trust that my internet connection stays stable over the next 45 minutes or so and hope that it all goes well. But, you know, the internet only goes bad on days when you have to do a live stream. It's just how it works. It's how the
The
internet
law
works.
of the
I see us.
universe.
We're live. Yeah, that's right. Awesome. We're live and we got people here. If people in the chat, I've seen some hellos already come in, but if you will let us know that you can hear us, that will ease my anxiety so we don't get 20 minutes into this and realize we were on mute the whole time. Don't ask me how I gained anxiety over that before. Hello, Doug. Good to see you.
Did it tell me, can I see the chat from YouTube?
Good. You should be able to. I mean, you could pull up the stream and mute it and see it from there. I don't know what the other end of StreamYard looks like for you. For me, I have a bunch of controls of comments and banners and media and all kinds of things. So
yeah, you've got the powerful view.
Yeah, sorry. Hello, Melanie. Good to see you here. We got lots of folks interested in this today. I'm excited about that. Howdy from Woo Wise. Woo Wise. Say that 3 times fast.
That one might be difficult.
Yeah. I already sound drunk and it's only the 3rd of July. So too early. Loud and clear, says Lizzie. Excellent. That is great. All right, then we will quit vamping now that we know people can hear us, and we'll get into it. Hello from the Netherlands. Good to see you. Hey, Kim. Good to see you again. Saw you earlier on accessibility-related topics, so good to see you again. June's here. Saw you too. Excellent. We got lots of good folks in the chat. Awesome. Well, we are here today to talk about the European Accessibility Act, everybody's favorite topic. I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of information here, but we have none other than Amber Hinds to decode and parse all of it for us. Because when I open up any of the documentation on this and the law and all that, I am totally overwhelmed by the wall of text. So when I saw all of this, I immediately emailed Amber and said, please come help. And because she's so nice, she said yes. So if you guys don't know Amber is part of Equalized Digital. They have the accessibility checker plugin. You've probably seen her speak at WordCamps, give talks here on the Admin Bars YouTube channel, write a whole year's worth of blog posts in Accessibility Weekly, which she loved, and she misses every day that she's not writing one of those.
At 2 a.m.?
Yeah, at 2 a.m. the day before it's due.
Kyle loved me.
You know, I've done this 3 years now of weekly post from a guest author. It's hard to keep up. That is
okay.
That is across the board.
It wasn't just me.
No, it is a hard thing. You know, every time I hesitate to say this because I'm gonna have to ask somebody again to do it in 2026, and every time I say it's a huge pain in the ass, I lower the chances of somebody saying yes to it. But you know, I do appreciate that very much. It was so worth it,
and it was fun. You know, and I will say, it helped me build the habit of blogging, which I transferred to my own website because I always said I need to blog. And I should have a post a week on my blog, but you know, you're doing work for clients, you're building your own stuff, and you just always deprioritize that. So having someone like Kyle to hold you accountable.
There you go.
Probably what your table groups are all about.
That's exactly it. That is my role most days. But yeah, if you've been saying for a long time you need to write daily posts, let me know because I can hound you about it for 52 weeks straight. I'm good at that. Excellent. Well, Amber, I'll let you do a little introduction for yourself if you want to tell anybody else anything about you or where they can find stuff. We do have some cool coupons that Amber shared with us. I'll put those on the screen here in a second. We're not selling a bunch of stuff today, but she came with coupons, so who am I to refuse that? Let's save some money while we're at it. But yeah, give us a little intro and then we'll dive into this thing.
Sure. So I am the CEO of Equalized Digital. As you mentioned, we are a company that focuses on website accessibility and app accessibility. We do a ton in the WordPress space because that is our background. I started as a freelancer, building websites on my own, and then grew a team, and we built very large enterprise websites and web applications. And then we realized we loved accessibility, and that was really where our heart was. So we launched publicly a tool that we had started building based on client needs, which was Accessibility Checker, our plugin for auditing WordPress websites. And we transitioned into doing just accessibility work. We do a lot of accessibility audits and remediation for websites, audits for other agencies. We also do audits for software companies, WordPress plugin companies, and write accessibility conformance reports for them. So that's kind of what we do. Outside of my company, I run the WordPress accessibility meetup, and which is online, not an in-person meetup. And I am on the core accessibility team, and I am on the board of the WP Accessibility Day nonprofit, which runs a 24-hour conference every October.
I love that outside of work, you listed 20 other accessibility related work topics.
Oh, okay, wait. I can give you, let's see. And I have 4 children.
Okay.
That's a
So,
not work related outside of work fact. That is weird, right? Like I work and my hobbies are my work.
yeah, well, that's called being an entrepreneur. That's kind of
Yes.
how it goes. Awesome. Well, I definitely appreciate having you here today. Like I said, I think there's two things that give web agencies and web developers a ton of anxiety. One is accessibility and two is laws. And we've just crammed those two together for one webinar here today. But I think you're going to help us out with some of this because I think there's things we all just need to know, whether we're in Europe or not in Europe. I know a lot of my European friends were happy we were doing something a little bit more Europe focused because I'm biased as being somebody in the States. Those things affect me more, but I definitely wanted to focus on this since it's huge in Europe, but it's also going to affect a little bit of everybody else too. So I think we should just kick things off. Why don't you tell us what the European Accessibility Act is?
Sure. And we'll give the caveat that we always have to give, which is that in my bio, you didn't hear me say that I'm an attorney. So I'm going to explain how I best understand all of these laws and what the impact is. But if you want real legal advice, don't get it off YouTube. Go talk to an attorney who specializes in European laws. But the European Accessibility Act is not a law. Everybody talks about it as a law. It's what's called a directive. And the European Union puts these out to help member states. So all the different countries that are part of the European Union, then, they get told, okay, you have to make laws and here's some guidance on what they should be. Because the idea really behind the European Accessibility Act was that across all of the different member states in the European Union, there was a lot of different laws and a lot of different criteria for measuring accessibility or not measuring accessibility. And they really wanted to harmonize it and make sure that everybody does the same thing because it's easier. Like we think about like, oh, laws, that's annoying. But at the same time, it is way easier for a business operating in the European Union if you just have to worry about one standard, no matter what country you have customers in. If you have to start thinking about 27 different standards for 27 different countries, that is a giant pain in the behind, right? So that's kind of the idea behind the European Accessibility Act. How it and then what it specifically does and the laws that were created from it do is require websites to be accessible following a standard called EN 301549. That is
We
a
got to work on the
standard.
branding.
Yeah. We've got a PDF link we can post if you're someone who loves walls of text. I love walls of text, but I know a lot of people are like, no way. But basically, what this does is it requires that websites conform with Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1, so the version before the current version, level AA. There's also a lot of other requirements in this beyond websites like for kiosks or ebooks or ticket sales or other sorts of accessibility that we're not really going to get into today, but that's the pertinent part here, which is that it's going to require that. And it also requires websites for businesses, although only a certain threshold, which is if the business needs to have 10 or more employees or make 2 million euros in turnover or revenue in a year. And then the law applies to them. If the business entity is below that, then it does not apply.
Yeah, Melanie hit it right on the head with what I was going to say. I've talked about this with Hans and Donata at Termageddon a bunch. The US, every state is making their own privacy law, and then now they got to come up with all these different things to make it conform with all these different places. And unifying everything like this because of the technicalities around accessibility and then everybody having a different set of standards or rules or whatever. I think unifying all this makes a ton of sense. Now we just got to wrap our mind around what this is. I also am appreciative that there is kind of a limit on the size of business because it's the burden is it's not linear, right? Like if you're just a small little mom and pop shop and you spend maybe $2,000 on a website just to get up and running, and now you need to do $20,000 worth of accessibility work, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, you know?
There are also many of the countries have added specific information for setting up what's called like disproportionate burden to show that the cost of the accessibility remediation would outweigh the benefit to users or outweigh the revenue and the profit balance of the company. So it's not, their goal isn't to put businesses out of business, right? But if there are reasonable things that can be done and a business is of a certain level and if you make $2 million a year in revenue, or you even think there's 10 employees, then there is definitely money there that can and should be spent on making sure that everyone can access your website and your products and your services.
Yeah, for sure. So you can, I guess the first little bit of criteria we can look at there is like, do your customers have 10 or more employees? Do they do 2 million in euros or more in revenue a year? Those are important things to know. But this is the European Accessibility Act. We're not all in Europe. So how does this affect people outside of Europe?
So in a lot of ways, it's going to be like GDPR, the privacy
Mm.
law, and the cookie banners that we started to see. There are lots of US companies that have those, not because they're in a state that requires it, but because they serve customers in Europe. So even if you or your clients are not located in Europe, if they are an e-commerce store that sells shoes to European customers or whatever that might be, then it will still apply to them even if they're not a European company, if they meet those other thresholds. So what we're going to start seeing is that, US based companies, other UK companies, other companies around the world are going to need to comply with this. The other thing that I would note too, that's kind of an interesting thing in the WordPress space is if you are someone who sells plugins or sells themes, you might be a solopreneur, and let's say you make $500,000 a year off your plugins or themes. You don't hit the employee or the revenue threshold. However, if you want to be able to sell those plugins to be used on websites that serve customers in EU or that are big enough and hit the threshold, you are going to have to make your products accessible. And agencies who are choosing plugins are going to need to be thinking about this, because that end website will be responsible, and increasingly they're going to not buy software
Mm.
that doesn't meet the requirements out of the box, because then it puts a huge development burden on them to go fix the problems in that software. So that is something that I think it's going to have a trickle down even to like lower revenue products in the WordPress space, because they're trying to sell in that market.
Yeah, there's like that upstream effect that it's all connected, especially in a WordPress ecosystem where we're plugging in literally like all kinds of software from everywhere, powering tons of different websites. And it's interesting the parallel with GDPR, and we kind of mentioned Melanie brought up the privacy stuff earlier. I felt like two things on that. One, I feel like there was a lot more anticipation of GDPR than this. Like we heard a lot more about it coming into it. Maybe not you because you live in this world all the time, but the rest of us heard a lot about GDPR before it went into effect. I feel like this kind of snuck up on us a little bit, and maybe you can talk to us a little bit about how long this has been in the works and when the enforcement is actually happening, or what kind of enforcement is happening. Maybe we just start with that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The European Accessibility Act has been around since 2019. So that's like 6 years.
Yeah.
The deadline for complying, like the deadline in which all websites were supposed to be accessible, was June 28th, 2025. So what, like 4 days ago, 5 days ago, something like that. Now, what is interesting to note is that not all, but many of the countries have what they call transition periods, which you don't see all the accessibility folks talking about this, because the downside, I think, of our industry is sometimes they like to sell with fear. But many of the countries do have allowances for transition periods that say any existing website that was running before June 28th is allowed to continue running as is through June 28th, 2030. So they have 5 years. But if it substantially changes, and this is where things get weird, right? What does that mean? I added a custom post type because I decided I need an events calendar now. Well, I've substantially changed because I didn't used to have that section in my website, right? Or if there's any redesigns or any new websites have to be made accessible. So there is kind of a phase there for existing sites. I don't think that they're going to suddenly start today going after all of these existing sites. But they're definitely working towards it. And the way it's going to be enforced is really interesting. I think there is complaints, which we have here in the US as well, which is that a customer can complain to every country had to say which body, like sometimes it's their Department of Social Welfare or something like that, where you could go submit a complaint and then they will investigate. There's also what's called market surveillance. Some of the countries allow you to, they might have people who are employed by that government agency that might go out and like mystery shop, like buy products. Like it's written in the laws that we're allowed to buy products without revealing our identity and to test the experience or to test the accessibility of the experience or of the product. So they might do that. In a few of the countries, they actually allow competitors to file complaints against their competitor because they say that, so let's say I make my website accessible and I invest in that, but someone else who sells the exact same thing as me does not. Well, I've spent money out of my revenue and they haven't. And so that's like an unfair business advantage. So I could go lodge a complaint with the governing body in that country and say, hey, my competitor hasn't done this. And so then they can get in trouble and I'm allowed to do that as like peer pressure, I guess. But the idea is trying to level the playing fields between business and make sure everyone's operating at the same level. So does that kind of answer the question of like how they're going to find out
Yeah.
about
So
problems and enforce it? Yeah.
it's interesting. Like I can see their idea behind that, but it feels like it makes it ripe for abuse. Like we've seen, going back to talking with Hans again, these new privacy laws come out, and then all of a sudden, some law firm somewhere gets wind of it and realizes this could be a huge windfall, and they go out and send demand letters to tons of people. They're just scraping the internet for these issues, and then filing lawsuits or whatever it might be. And it seems like this kind of opens the door up to that same type of behavior.
So the one big difference between the Americans with Disabilities Act or like the privacy stuff in the United States and all of these laws in other countries like Canada or Europe is that in the laws outside the United States, there is no, you as a consumer can sue and make money or complain and get money. And so or an attorney can go like find someone and build a case and get money. There is no payment possible for the complaint, the person who submits the complaint or provides evidence of a failure to comply. So they've taken away that revenue motivation. If I complain, what I get is an accessible website that I get to use as my reward, right? There's nothing else. And I think that that is really helpful there because it will stop some of that abuse. If I complain about my competitor not having an accessible website and not following the law, um, they're going to make it might maybe quote hurt them because they have to pay money to make their website accessible, but it's just going to put them in the same position as me. And actually, depending on how you think about some of the SEO benefits, maybe it's better if their website's not accessible, right? Like people might bounce off their website or it might not show up as well in search as mine does that's accessible. So I
That's
don't know if it'll be
interesting.
abused in the same way that our law is here. And honestly, I hate that about the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't even occur to me. Like, that people probably do that different elsewhere. So more American bias here on that, because that's definitely interesting.
Mhm.
Uh, and go
So
ahead.
it might be worth talking about. So if you can't get sued for not following it, what can happen to you? And this varies based on countries, but typically there are fines involved. I've seen like as low as the first instance is like 5,000 euros up to 138,000 euros. Uh, Ireland and Cyprus. I'm working on a blog post right now where I'm going through every country, which is taking me a little longer than I thought because not all the laws are in English. So I have to translate them and understand them from Google Translate. But Ireland and Cyprus are two that I've seen where they've actually added jail time as potential offenses beyond the fines. So like Cyprus for a first offense, it can become a criminal offense if there is either failure to comply when the government asks you to fix your website and you just straight up refuse, or say it needs to be taken down and you refuse to take it down, or anyone who delivers false documentation. So this is really interesting because almost all of these laws require that there be a public accessibility statement on the website, and it has specific things that have to be included, including what are all of the problems that exist on the website and the plan and timeline to remediate them. So for a website owner or for an agency who is helping their customers create these plans, you have to be honest. Because if you create false documentation and you say, this website is accessible, or you tell your client that, and the client relies on that thinking that they're complying with the European Accessibility Act, well, now you have created in Cyprus what's considered a criminal offense. And the first level of that is a minimum, like up to 2 years in jail. And then it goes more, like the more serious it gets. Um, so you really have to be thoughtful about making sure, that you are following the spirit of the law and being honest with your clients and with what information is placed on the website in an accessibility statement.
Well, that jail time's a little scary for sure, but it sounds like they're
Yeah.
not going to find a color contrast issue on your website and show up at the door with handcuffs. Like there's going to be
No,
some in
no,
between
no, no.
time where we can work on these things.
Yeah, they all have some sort of process for outlaying, how will you'll get notified, you'll have some sort of timeline with a deadline for doing remediation. Um, you might still get the fine right away,
Hmm.
but it's like a smaller administrative fine, probably to cover the cost of the entity that had to, monitor you. uh,
Sure.
and the jail time is really if problems get really bad you refuse to fix, or if you have literally like lied on documents about the accessibility.
The honesty is a good idea. So I like that. So
Mhm.
just don't lie, and you probably won't end up in jail. That's a good one. Uh,
Yes.
Another bit of a parallel to GDPR maybe is it feels like Europe's ahead of us, at least in the States. These laws get created, and then a lot of people start using GDPR as kind of the blueprint or the starting place for whatever their law is going to be, right? So do you
Mhm.
expect something like that happening with this, since we have something a little bit more formalized and uniform, something that maybe other countries might start adopting, or at least in part?
I think it's possible. Uh, it is hard to say how the US, for example, will react because we already have some of these laws. And so I don't know if we'd say, okay, we're going to just remove like the lawsuit provision in the Americans with Disabilities Act, which has been there since the 1970s. I personally think that would be great because I don't think that people with disabilities should have to have the burden of forcing businesses to serve them. Like, I think that should be the government, not, it's
Mhm.
extra work for them. Why should they have to do that? And I think it's better for businesses. We are seeing in the US, this hasn't fully passed in California, but it passed, I believe, the Senate and is going to the House, which is a bill. And this was just like a week or two ago. I can message people the link later if they want it. That's actually saying it's amending or trying to resolve some of the issues that have happened with those lawsuits. And it's saying that before someone can sue, they have to contact the business and give them a reasonable amount of time to fix the problem. So I do see that some of our laws are going to be adjusted because the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 508, which requires accessibility for federal websites in the United States, those are a lot older actually than some of these laws in Europe are. And so the benefit of the European law in that sense is that it has like a newer perspective on the internet.
Right.
Right? When some of these were written, the internet didn't even exist. And and so I do think that probably we will see some amendments and changes that will more closely align with Europe, but I don't know if I can say how I feel about whether it'll just copy it.
Sure. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what they're actually wanting us to do with these websites. I imagine most of the people here are website designers and developers, so we need to know what things do we really need to be looking out for when it comes to when we're building our websites. Color contrast is maybe an obvious one here, but what kinds of things are really important, especially inside this European Accessibility Act?
Yeah. So the European Accessibility Act requires, as we mentioned before, web content accessibility guidelines conformance. Uh, if you aren't familiar with that, there's information on our blog, but also you could just Google and find the official website for that. It seems dense
Mm.
because it's a very large list of standards and like rules. But the thing is each individual one of those things is something that is like a pass fail kind of criterion. And once you start digging into it, you can learn how to do it. Uh, so I'm going to say some of the common things, but what we mentioned here won't be literally everything that you have to do just because we'd need a much longer webinar for that.
Nope, nobody got
So,
time for that.
yeah. So color contrast, you need to make sure that from a broad perspective, everything on the website can be engaged with and understood no matter how someone is interacting with the content. So it can transform from one format to another. An example of this is if you have a video or you have podcasts, you need to make sure that somebody who cannot hear, or maybe is both deafblind, can't hear and can't see, can also get the content that is in the video. So that means captions and it means transcripts. If you have an image, you would need to give it alternative text so that someone who is blind and using a screen reader can get the information that they need about the image. So that's the biggest way I would think about it, which is like if someone is not engaging with the website in the way of a typical user, which is with a keyboard and a mouse and having typical vision and hearing, can they still understand everything about this website? A big thing that I always recommend is that you spend an hour going through the website and trying to do everything that you would want a user to do without a mouse. So you use your tab key to move forward, shift tab to move backwards. Anything that is a button, buttons do something like open a modal, change slides on a carousel, expand an accordion, should be able to be triggered with both the return key and the spacebar. If it is a link, then you just use the return key. So, can you put the product, can you find a product using search? Can you add it to a cart? Can you go to the cart page? Can you enter everything in the checkout form? And then can you complete a checkout without using your mouse? That would be like the first thing that I would recommend doing. Can you see where you are? You should have like a visible focus outline as you tab through so you know exactly where you are, you don't get lost. Then there's other stuff like making sure headings are in the right order. Having meaningful links is a really big one. Link text, Google likes this too. Link text that means something. Don't write learn more or click here. Have something that says learn more about us or whatever that might be. And there's a lot of things that can be found with automated tools, which our accessibility checker plugin is helpful for. But it does require some manual testing. Oh,
Yeah, I'm trying not to interrupt you, but I'm getting garbly and losing internet connection here, so I'm trying to vamp
Oh
at the
no.
same time and make sure that everything goes smoothly. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Um, it's the what you bring up about testing all this on your own. That was the huge eye opener for me. Was just open up a screen reader and try it while I'm looking at the screen, and while I intimately know this website inside and out. Can I navigate it? That's a pretty low bar at that point, because you built the website, you know where everything is. You're not coming into it fresh. You will find things as you do that that need to be fixed. If you really want to take it to the next level, close your eyes and try to do it, and that becomes even a bigger challenge. Uh, this is just a good time to mention it too, but you do have a couple courses on using screen reader. So you have one on VoiceOver, which is on the Mac. That's already live. There's a 10% coupon for that. There's you have a one for NVIDIA, which is in pre-sale right now. I would highly recommend people take a look at those. If you're not used to using a screen reader, you might not know what settings to use or what buttons to press or how to go through that process. And these courses will definitely help you out with all that. But even just open it up and giving it a shot. NVIDIA's free, VoiceOver's on your Mac, so you can use either of these things. Everybody should have access to those. But it's very, no pun intended, it's eye-opening to do that and go through that process and see just how much of a different experience it is if you're used to using a keyboard and a mouse all the time. So that's huge right there.
Yeah, and I would say they can be a little bit scary when you first turn them on. I think everyone's reaction is, "Oh my gosh, how do I make it stop?" Which was part of what motivated me to create these courses. Trying to explain there's different keyboard shortcuts you need to know and that kind of stuff. But the biggest thing is just using it, and the more you use it, the less scary it will seem. And once you learn the keyboard shortcuts, it's pretty easy to figure out, okay, this is what I need to listen to for each component. And then you'll know, is it working or is it not?
Yeah, when I first started doing it, which was way too long into my career for sure, I would wait till the website was done and then start keyboard testing it and all that. And I realized that was not probably the optimal way to do it. So I find myself now all the time when I'll save something and need to go look at it at the front end. I got a keyboard shortcut. I can open up VoiceOver. I'll tab through it real quick. Let me just check these things as I go. And that makes it a whole lot easier than waiting to the end and creating a ton of work for yourself. So really, really
Yeah,
good
and
tips on
all
that.
of that. I mean, the automated testing. So with accessibility checker, like, especially if you're building in the block editor, but it works with page builders too. But in the block editor, it's right there. So, you know, if you're like me, I add like a section and I hit save,
Yep.
right? And I go check it out and maybe like do mobile responsive and all of that kind of stuff. But you can like fix your accessibility automated issues as you go because you'll see that there. And then on the front end, if you're doing the mobile responsive checking, that's a great time to just tab through and make sure everything works. Um, but I'll say too for agencies, because I know that's a lot of who is here, what I would recommend doing is invest some time in your starter. So whatever you start from, without any client content or client branding, go put some dummy content in it and then spend time checking all of that. Because if you find out, for example, oh, there's no way to open these accordions with a keyboard, then you can either go back to the developer of that block or that page builder and say, hey, these suck. Or you can just say, hey, go ask in the admin bar, what's a better accordion plugin that works for accessibility? And you're going to get a bunch of people that are going to say, oh, this is the one I use. And then you can, swap it out. But you only have to do that once then. Then every client website you build from then on, the accordions work because you've already set it up in your base to be like an accessibility ready starter. So it seems like, oh, spending time on that is a lot of work when no one's paying you to do that, but it will pay off in projects down the line because you won't have to repeat that work every time.
Yeah, exactly. And I know some of the most simple advice you've given me in the past, but it's stuck with me is like, well, make sure that your header and footer do really well because they're going to be on every page of the website. So if there's issues in your header and your header's on every page of the website, now you have issues on every page of your website. So there's some simple things like that where, okay, well, I can knock out these little things that are going to have a big impact across the entire website.
Mhm.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about what the law is and the I forget now what you called it, the act. We've talked about what that is and some of the penalties that we talked about. And now we've talked about conforming to the WCAG guidelines. You mentioned earlier that some people like to sell accessibility out of fear. Nobody on this call likes to do that. But these are conversations that are tough to have with your clients to say, hey, there's some issues with your website, and I think we need to look at them. That's not so bad if somebody else built the website, but when you built the website, those conversations are a little bit harder. So, I'm often talking to clients that don't even know website accessibility exists. So I have to start that entire conversation with a lot of education, but I don't want to do that out of fear. Right now is a great time to start talking about this with clients because we have a new European Accessibility Act to talk about, or kind of give us that door to go through to start talking about that. So how do you approach talking with clients about this? Your clients are probably coming to you specifically for it. So how should we go talk to our clients about this without just being scare tactics?
I mean, we have, I'll tell you, we have some legacy clients that we still host and every once in a while hear from that we have reached out to. Like, I built their website myself, hacking away at Genesis in 2009, right? Like, that website was not accessible. So I've had these conversations too. And I think it feels a little bit like you don't want to go to your client and be like, I built you something that is broken. Because it's broken for a subset of users. But the way I always think about framing it is one, yes, like you said, Kyle, there are certain pivot points in a year, like milestones, when you're like, this is a great time to reach out to your clients because it opens a door. It's like a trigger that seems natural. So we've used that before where we would say, hey, this law is going to be enforced or just started being enforced, or we're seeing this thing happen, it's coming up, and we want to make sure that you're in a good position, as your business grows. Maybe they're not at that threshold yet, but you could potentially reach them and be like, hey, we're thinking of you. This is the best practice. Sometimes another way to watch that too is Google has been modifying what they use in Lighthouse and increasingly adding more accessibility checks. Like when they first did it, there were only like 10 and there's like more now. So if you watch like the Google blog, and if you note that they've updated one, you could be like, oh, hey, this check got added to PageSpeed Insights. It will impact your search ranking, right? So sometimes you can find things like that will be motivating to clients. And so I would introduce it and I would explain it from the framework of I am staying on top of web accessibility best practices and changes in laws and changes in just like general culture around what's good for a website. So you don't have to. That's what I'm here for, right? And this is a thing that I think you should be aware of. Let's talk about what it might look like for you to budget this in for next year. Because a lot of times if you go to them and they weren't thinking about it, they've never heard of it, they're unlikely. Some clients, you might know the client that is like, oh yeah, you say it's a good idea, I'll pay for it right now. Right? But a lot of them, they're not. So I like June, July, August, this is a great time to introduce that because they're maybe starting to think about their budget for next year. And then you can like feed them some information. There's stuff that, you can get off our blog or off the admin bar website as well in the accessibility weeklies. And you can sort of say, this is something that we think we should add to, hopefully they're all on maintenance retainers. And it could just be like, let's add 3 hours a month to do some fixes over time. Or if it's someone that you're like, hey, maybe they already probably need a rebuild because I built their website 4 or 5 years ago. I can't believe they're still using it. I think it looks ugly now because I've learned a lot from that time, right? Like you might go to them and say, let's talk about a rebuild. And it can include accessibility. It can include SEO optimizations. Maybe it can update on your branding because it's probably been a while since you've done that. Like all of these sort of things and just figuring out how to wrap it in. And I've never once had a client come back to me and be mad because X years ago, I didn't tell them that it had to be this, especially when you frame it around changes in laws.
Yeah, and I love you bringing up the point of, I'm staying on top of this so you don't have to. Look, everybody watching this right now, even though you're staring at somebody who's sitting in a basement with his shoes off, you're doing continuing education with industry experts here, right? We can always church this up a little bit. So you're staying on top of these things. You're attending webinars. You're trying to learn more, and all that effort is something that I think we really devalue in ourselves, in the value we're providing for our clients, right? Because you're showing up here so you can better serve your clients, and you'll probably never tell them about this webinar, but I think it is important for clients to realize you are investing hours in this education so they don't have to, for their benefit, so you can solve these problems that they didn't even know existed, right? So attending things like this, now you have something to talk about. Hey, I attended this webinar. Here's what I learned. Here's what I think we should do. Your suggestion of like, let's budget this in for next year is a really nice, soft way to get in there without feeling like you're trying to pry their wallets open, which I think some of us who don't love selling that makes us nervous, just saying, hey, I need you to give me some money now. So that makes it a lot easier too. So those are really great tips.
Well, I think too, going back to our pre-conversation about writing blog posts,
Sure.
this would be a really great thing to like have a blog post and send, even if you only do one newsletter a month for your customers. I think it's really important to do that. And just say, here's what's changing or what's best practices that you need to be aware of. And this also totally reminds me, I forgot, like, I don't even know. My partner, Chris, wrote a blog post. It's pretty near the top of ours that has email templates you can download, like they're Google Docs. And I think it's a series of 3 or 4 emails about European Accessibility Act. So that also might be easier. But I would say, like, thinking about anytime you're watching these, like, can you just take what you learned, write a short blog summary, and then at the end of the month, you send out the 1 or 2 or 4 maybe to your clients. And then that's a way to stay front of mind for them, show them that you're trying to keep them appraised on like what is best practices.
Yep, I love it. And I was trying to quickly find that blog post you're referencing. How to talk to clients about the European Accessibility Act. I bet this is it.
Yeah, probably.
Perfect. It was published on my birthday, so it's even better. I'm going to pop that in the chat there. I didn't read through it, so I'm not 100% positive that's the right one, but most likely so.
I think that sounds like it.
Okay, good. All right. I want to get to some of these questions. I've started about 7 questions we've had in here, but is there anything I'm missing out of this that I should be asking you that I didn't think to ask you ahead of time?
I don't think so.
Okay. So you're saying I did a good job. I'm okay with that.
Yes.
But I didn't want to leave something
out
important that you're like, hey, Kyle didn't even ask the obvious question. I will do that. All right, let's dive in here. And if you guys have more questions, even if it's something specific to something going on in your agency, let's throw it in here. You got us here to answer questions. Let's do it. Melanie asked a question. This is back when we were talking about who needs to comply, the 10 employees, the 2 million euros. What about nonprofits?
Yes, it applies to nonprofits as well. It's not just for-profit businesses.
Perfect. All right. Let's see. Website muscle. Aren't nearly 100% of websites out of compliance?
Yeah. So if we're referencing the WebAIM Million report, which is a really interesting report that is created using the Wave API, and they crawl the homepages of the top 1 million websites. This year's report said that I think it was like 94.6% of websites had easily detectable accessibility problems. So the answer is yes. So if you're wondering, does my agency website or do my client websites have problems? Unless you have intentionally focused on accessibility, then the answer is they have problems. You don't need an audit to tell you that, unfortunately. So I think that we are going to hopefully see a shift in this with laws like the European Accessibility Act, and it would be really interesting to monitor those studies that are done. Now, the thing to note too, like even with Wave automated tools, and I'll say this, our tool also can give you false positives. So it could be that that number is a little bit high. For example, on Elementor websites, their screen reader text in Wave, it always gets a failed color contrast because of the way they implement it, because they make it transparent, which isn't, I mean, it's not great from an automated testing standpoint, but it's not bad or wrong. Like,
Gotcha.
sighted people aren't supposed to see it. But Wave, anytime it scans an Elementor website, is going to say, oh, this website has problems. But actually, if you look at it, no, it doesn't. So So, I mean, it's possible that number is actually a little bit lower, but yeah, a lot of them have problems.
Yeah, the thing I don't like about when this question comes up, and I'm not accusing this person of doing this here, but I feel like some people use this question as an excuse to say, okay, well, if it can't be 100% compliant, no website's 100% compliant. I'm going to fail no matter what. So why even try? So how do you handle a situation like that?
So, the way I like to think about accessibility is it is a journey, not a destination. I draw parallels for clients a lot between accessibility and SEO. I don't know any marketer who knows their stuff is not going to say, "We've made our website search engine optimized. We're done now."
Mhm.
Right? So accessibility is frequently the same way. It is a scale. There are websites that may have some technical issues, but are still very, very, very usable. Uh, in contrast to websites that are completely unusable. And so, even if you are never going to be 100% compliant on all parts of the website and all blog posts going back 15 years, that does not mean that you can't make the key parts of the website, like the header and the navigation, the important pages that tell about your services and your contact form, accessible. And those
Yeah.
could be 100% accessible very easily and in a short amount of time.
And the SEO one is such a great example for people like us. We realize that a website is never finished being search engine optimized. But I've had the conversation with clients too, like, you want to get in better shape. Like, I know a guy across the street, he goes to the gym 25 times a day. He's chiseled out of steel. He's still trying to get in better shape, right? That's a journey that's never done for him. So there's some analogies like that I think are helpful. All right, let's see here. Another one from website Muscle. How does this affect or sites on Shopify, Squarespace, and other platforms where they have less control over the code?
So the law does not care what software has been chosen to be used. So it does not matter if you can't control the checkout page on Shopify, which is the case because it just runs through Shopify. What that would mean is that if issues are identified on Shopify, then the website owner should contact Shopify and tell them and try and get them to fix it, or Squarespace or whatever. If it cannot be fixed, or the vendor refuses to fix it, all of the laws in the European Accessibility Act say that you need to terminate the contract and go somewhere else. So if for some reason Shopify, I mean, I'd be shocked because it has a huge focus on e-commerce with the European Accessibility Act. I'm sure Shopify is watching it and they're going to make sure their stuff is conformant. But the bottom line for them is that if they don't, then websites are going to start moving away from them, because the moment a website owner gets a very large government fine or loses tax breaks, like that's another thing that could potentially happen. And honestly, in some cases, that's more painful than the 10,000 euro fine, right? Um, is the moment, and then Shopify or whatever platform CMS says, yeah, we're not doing this, or it's not a priority, is the moment they're going to be like, yeah, we're rebuilding our website somewhere where we're not going to have these risks of getting in trouble with the government. So,
Right.
yeah.
I almost see that as
And
a big advantage to those platforms that are not open source like WordPress, because they can control so much more of that from one place, fix it, and now everybody gets those fixes. And then, you've mentioned before, like when a big plugin like Elementor does accessibility improvements, it affects millions of websites, right? So, but we still
mhm,
have a very dispersed ecosystem with us all using a million different combinations of plugins and themes and developers experience and all that.
mhm, yeah.
All right. Kim asked, does this apply to all businesses with 10 plus employees or 2 million in revenue in any industry, or is it just some industries?
So there's a primary focus on e-commerce, but it can also apply to service businesses and other things like that, particularly if there's like a lead form
Hmm.
where it can be tied to commerce. I guess, if that makes sense. It wouldn't apply to, I don't know What I'm not certain of is like if you had a monetized website, like a blog, like food blog, where it's not obviously news, because news gets covered and other things like that. And it's not regulated in as media in the same kind of way. I'm not certain if that does, even if it hits the threshold. It may or may not. I'd have to look that one up and follow up on it. But
Interesting.
broadly, I would say yes, it applies to them all.
Just assume yes. All right.
Yes.
Click and repeat showed up a little bit late, so we're going to repeat this part of it. But they said if they work with clients primarily in one country but have a not significant number of clients in other countries or internationally, does this affect them? So can we quickly summarize kind of who's affected by the European Accessibility Act?
Yeah, so any of the 27 member states in the European Union, so any of those countries, it applies. What I would say is that you need to research what nexus thresholds are for different countries. If you're wondering, like we were talking about, Ireland or Cyprus has jail time. Am I worried about that? Well, there's going to be somewhere where it says how many customers or employees you have in that country, where they say, yes, our laws apply to you, versus it's incidental, right? Like one or two here and there. So that's what I would look up in order to try and figure it out, is how do they define nexus, which is a legal term for whether or not something applies to you.
Interesting. So again, neither one of us are lawyers. We'll just re-mention that here.
Yep.
Good reset on that. All right. Website muscle. Is that it again? Is there, we kind of touched on the 100% compliance. But I think this question is interesting. If we go back to all of this European Accessibility Act sites, WCAG, are all those WCAG tests pass fail, or is there gray area in some of this?
So every WCAG is set up in a way that they can be pass fail, or they are pass fail. There's no like, we sort of pass one. Now, where it's different is that you could pass 10 of them and fail 2 of them, right? And so overall, you'd be what's considered like partially conformant, because you don't fully conform with the entire thing. But there is a path to getting 100% compliant, and there are websites that are 100% WCAG conformant.
Right. And this is where the semantics get a little bit hard, because you could be 100% WCAG conformant, but that doesn't mean your website's 100% accessible. And I think that's where we get a little bit mixed up on some of these things is WCAG doesn't cover every possibility ever. So there still might be a user out there who can't use your website. And I think by definition, that would mean it's not accessible to everyone, but that doesn't mean it doesn't conform with what these laws
With the
are
law.
citing, right?
Yeah,
So.
but this is also why these laws require there to be an accessibility statement. And one of the things on the accessibility statement is you have to provide contact information for how someone can contact you if they need help. And then the EN 301-549 that I mentioned before, if you look at some of the requirements under that, they also have specific requirements under like, are your support team trained to know how to respond to accessibility questions or needs? Does your documentation, so if you're a plugin developer, does your documentation explain how to use it from an accessibility standpoint, right? Or what accessibility features are built into it? So for a business, the way that might translate, support team, whatever staff member answers your info at email box, or if you set up a special one for accessibility at, they need to know what to do. If this person says, I can't access this PDF, so number one, the fastest way for a lot of times is, hey, I've copied and pasted all of the content into an email for you, so you get what you need right now. But that's not, it doesn't end there, right? But then you have to go to the marketing team or whoever and say, hey, we got notified that this PDF isn't accessible and we need to get it fixed, and then, or turn it into a web page, or whatever that might be. But really it's figuring out, okay, someone has complained or, asked for help. Maybe it's not a complaint. It's just, can you help me? having people who respond to that, whether it's via email or over the phone, like have a path for helping them and getting them the information they need, or helping them check out in an alternative method if they can't, and then creating an internal plan for ensuring that it doesn't happen again. So yes, you can be WCAG conformant and still have some accessibility problems. I mean, you can be WCAG conformant and be very unusable, just because like maybe your navigation menu is organized in a way that makes sense to one person and that person is you.
Right.
And everyone else cannot find things on your website, right? There's a lot of instances of that. I mean, we've all had clients who their design sense, we're like, I don't know where you're coming from, but no one is going to like this except for you. But that's where having that accessibility statement is really helpful, because it communicates what to do if there are problems, and then like you having a plan to follow up on them.
Yeah, and I could see people being resistant to wanting to put all their contact information in there, but that's what you want. You want them to reach out to you personally, and then you fix the problem, and then none of this goes to a court anywhere because you just solved their problem. I don't know the ins and outs of this case, so I'm just going to kind of paraphrase it here, but I remember talking about a Domino's case, I believe it was, here in the States, where somebody wanted to use a coupon online, and it wasn't accessible in a way they could use the coupon, and
They
when
couldn't
they called,
order
they
their
wouldn't
pizza.
honor. Right. They wouldn't honor that over the phone. It's like, just help people out, and then you could avoid this entire situation, So I think some of it's just like human decency, at some
And
point.
good customer service. And the thing
Yeah.
is if somebody finds an accessibility problem on a website and says, hey, I need this fixed, and you help them, you may, or the business may very well get a 5-star review out of that. I had an issue and they went out of their way to help make it better.
Yeah.
And I mean, why have a business if you're not willing to support your customers when they ask for help?
Very good point. All right. I think we kind of touched on this, but does an agency fall under the scope based on size and service? So if an agency is making 2 million and got 10 people, do they count?
Yes.
They count. All right. We'll move through that one quickly. Got one here. No, is that the same one? Yes, it is. There we go. Here we go. Who is ultimately responsible for the website being accessible? The agency or the company that owns the website?
So based on the European Accessibility Act, it is on the company that owns the website. That said, and this is the same in the United States too, with some of the laws. And we had an attorney come to WordPress accessibility meetup not too long ago, and he gave a really phenomenal presentation on this. It also depends on what is in your contract. So if you have included accessibility in the scope of the contract and are maintaining the website for them, like you're the one who puts all of the content every time they read a blog post, you copy and paste it for them, right? And you don't do what you're supposed to do, then you won't be in trouble with the government under the European Accessibility Act, but you may very well, your client could potentially sue you for breach of contract, or whatever the equivalent of that is in Europe. I don't know. But right, because you have said you do something and then you didn't do it. But ultimately the fines and things like that would all be against the website owner.
Yeah. That definitely doesn't give you an excuse to just say, okay, well, I don't have to do it now, though, because that will come back to you eventually.
Well,
All right.
and if you think about selling websites to clients, um, this is an area right now where I think a lot of agencies and freelancers can differentiate themselves. Because if you're not including accessibility in the scope, and you're quoting a project that you think the business falls under, this is big enough to fall under this, then you are 100% like not going to stand out. And if somebody else does, then who are they going to go with? The person who's like, here's the law and here's how we're going to help make sure your website conforms to it, or the person who didn't mention it in the proposal, right?
Yeah. And your proposals can plant some seeds of doubt in clients about other people they might be talking to. To your point, you mentioned accessibility in your proposal, and they get 2 other proposals and neither one of those mention accessibility. They're going to say, I wonder if these other people aren't doing this, So it's a great way for you to stand out and show that you're doing a little bit more. All right. How reliable are automated checkers in general? As somebody who has an automated checker, I'm sure you can tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, so our plugin accessibility checker uses a modified version of an open source library called Axe Core, which comes from a company called DQ. And DQ says that Axe Core can find over 50% of accessibility problems. The other 50% have to be tested and found by a human. Now, why is ours a modified version? One, because we found that Axe Core rules were not all reliable. So, for example, their skip link check doesn't function in WordPress because it throws it off because it's not on the page, right? There's some stuff we modified the rule to make sure that it works really well in a WordPress specific environment. But there are other tools, and a lot of accessibility professionals say maybe automated checkers find 30 or 40% of the things. And I don't know with ours. I can't give you a number of like it's going to find X% of the issues on your website because it really depends on how the website is built, to be frank. There are some plugin or some tools that might say you're at 100%. Lighthouse is one that I know, like there's a big too where somebody that like was because it was Wix was the best website platform because it had the best Lighthouse scores. And then we go look at all these websites built with Wix that have 100% in Lighthouse, and they're so bad you can't even use them with a keyboard. So you can't only do automated checkers, but automated checkers are really important to the process because they save you so much time, because there are things that are so easy for an automated tool to find, like empty links, empty buttons, color contrast errors. Although even that, like we talked about the example with Elementor and Wave,
Sure.
Wave still finds it as a false positive. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a long-winded answer to that. I think you should use them. We use them. Not just
Yeah,
our
and,
tool,
and
like there are lots that save you so much time, but you can't only use them.
yeah, I mean, still, even if it is the lower 30% number, let's say, that's still 30% that you didn't have to go do manually. So it's going to help you save time and make things more efficient either way. Philip's
Mhm.
got several questions here. So, is there a plugin that allows transcriptions on videos? Is an embedded YouTube video that has automatic transcriptions from YouTube good enough?
So in order to be accessible to people who are deafblind, you actually have to have a transcript, not just YouTube options embed the transcripts uh, automatically in video. You can get them out of the YouTube API. There's a plugin called Able Player. Joe Dolson is
Hmm.
the new owner of that plugin and is maintaining it. That one allows you to display transcripts that pull from YouTube. What we use a lot on our client websites that has a little bit nicer of a designed interface is Vimeo. Vimeo automatically puts the transcripts in and does that as well. So those would be the two that I would look at, either Able Player for YouTube rather than native YouTube, or using Vimeo instead.
Great. All right. Another one here. We got two more that are kind of on the accessibility statement. So, what is included in an accessibility statement, and is there a template? Obviously, you don't have to give us the full answer of what's included, but where should Philip go?
So if you install our free plugin, Accessibility Checker, it's going to create a draft page for you that is a template. So that's the answer on that. The easiest way to get a template in your website is to activate our free plugin, and it will be there ready for you to edit. The one thing that it doesn't have, and we're probably going to update this, that is required specifically for Europe, is in Europe, in addition to having the list of known issues and a plan for fixing them or timeline, and information about any features that are present, so like the good things that exist that help people, and contact information like we already talked about. In Europe, you also have to provide information to people about where they can go if they want to file an official complaint against the website. So you'd need to identify the specific country, and I would do the country where like the headquarters of the website is, what that agency is, and you have to explain that people have the right to go file a complaint against the website and provide a link to where they can do it. So that is a requirement in the accessibility statement in Europe.
Okay. Since you're doing that blog post of all the different countries, are you including who those governing bodies are in
Yes.
each one of the countries? Excellent. So that will be a great resource as well. All right, one more in here. Do companies not falling under the requirements 2 million, 10 employees, do they still need an accessibility statement?
So I would say yes. In They don't definitively need to have it in all countries under the European Accessibility Act. Some of them will do that, but also it's just a best practice. So even here in the United States, a lot of attorneys who work in the ADA field will tell you that you should have an accessibility statement on the website for the number one reason that it helps reduce lawsuits. Because if there is a statement, then people are more likely to reach out and contact you than to go file a complaint.
Yeah, and I think if we take the ambulance chasing lawyers out of the equation, they're probably just louder than everybody else. If somebody comes to your website and just needs help, they just want the help. They don't want to spend the next year wrapped up in a court case and spend all their time and energy on this. They just want whatever you have on your website. So the easiest way for you to be able to provide that for them, since you can't cover every possible base, is just show them, here's how you can contact me and I will be glad to help you out. That's kind of as simple as it really is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we got one a couple of months ago, and it was actually our performance plugin for some reason, like the way the JavaScript was being minimized, broke our mobile menu buttons to expand the drop downs.
Mm,
And I guess we hadn't noticed. And somebody was like, I'm trying to use your navigation menu and it doesn't work. And I was like, oh, this is like a major problem on my website. Thank
yeah,
you. I'm so glad you told me about this because, it wasn't just for them. It didn't work for them. And in their specific keyboard only scenario, it didn't work for anyone on mobile, you know.
definitely. You
So,
definitely want to know if that's the problem.
yeah, you want to know if people are having problems on your website and you want to give them a venue to tell you about it, not, Google.
Right. Not
Right?
Google,
Like,
not the government, not a
yeah,
lawyer.
not,
Just
yeah.
let's settle this.
Give people a venue
We
to complain to you.
That's right. You'd rather handle that quietly.
Hmm.
Awesome. Well, I know we've already kind of pushed the time limit here. I've kept you longer than I said I would, but I want to re-mention here for everybody, if you want to go check out Accessibility Checker, there is the free version in the repo. There's also the pro version there. If you go to Equalize Digital, which I had on my clipboard a second ago, so I'll grab that again, put it in the chat, and use that code tab10. You can get 10% off of that. Amber also has those two courses, one that's already out on VoiceOver, one that's coming on NVIDIA on how to use a screen reader tool so you can start testing some of these things on your own. You can also use that same coupon code for either of those and save 10%, which is awesome. As always, Amber, this is so helpful for the folks like me who see the wall of text and just want to give up. I feel a lot less anxious about all this now. And I do really appreciate all the time and energy you've given to me and the admin bar to help us out with all these things. If there's anywhere else people can find you, follow you, go support you, what's the best way for everybody to do that?
Yeah, so equalizedigital.com is our website, of course. Join our email list if you want to get notified when that blog post comes out. So equalizedigital.com/focus-state is to join the email list. I am most active on Twitter, X, whatever it's called these days. And you can find me there at Hey Amber Hinds.
Excellent. Yes. In fact, I think I just got a newsletter from you before this call, or I just saw it right before this call. Great information in there. So I definitely recommend everybody do that and at least keep up there. Those the accessibility meetups are huge. You guys have a big library of all those past ones. If you just want to keep doing some ongoing training, you got a huge library of really good conversations, talks, presentations, all that kind of thing there. And then start joining those and hanging out with everybody on a twice monthly basis.
Yeah, you
Sweet.
can find the meetups if you go in our website, in the navigation under Learn is where you can find those. Those are all actually approved for continuing education credits for certifications through the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. So we work really hard to make sure that they're quality content in order to maintain that permission for them to count for that. So yeah, you can find all those back recordings.
So not like a guy in a basement with no shoes on.
I also am not wearing
fallback.
shoes right now,
Okay.
Kyle.
Perfect. We're good. I just like to pull back the curtain, you know.
Dude,
All right,
people who wear
sweet.
shoes in their house are weird.
Yeah, not gonna do it. You're lucky I have anything on. All right, good to see everybody today. I hope everybody has an awesome day. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us. I'll make sure when Amber gets that blog post published, I'll make sure that's with this video. So if you're watching at a future date, check around this video and you should find the link for that. Amber, again, thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll do this again soon.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we'll talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.
Bye.